The next shape we're going to explore is the humble simple line. A line class is what's used to define lines, and a line will connect 2 points that you give it. That's 4 parameters total because each point is a pair of numbers. The first pair is start x, start y, which indicates where the beginning of the line will be. The next pair is end x, end y, which defines where the end point of the line will be. Here we see the UML diagram for the line. You can see by the constructors that you can create an empty line, or you can define all 4 points, start y, end x, end y, as 4 arguments when you construct a line. Again, as with the previous thing we looked at, that is the text, where we had to point out that the coordinate system is the pane that you drop the text into, the same is true here. So this is you're putting this into a scene, and the scene has coordinates 0, 0 through get width and get height. And when we put a line in there, the definitions of the start x, start y, end x are all with respect to coordinates in that system. So in fact, if we wanted a line to extend diagonally from the top left corner all the way down to the bottom right corner, we would give the start x and start y coordinates as 0. The end x coordinate would be the width of the pane, and the end y coordinate would be the height of the pane. And remember, positive values of x go downwards in this coordinate system. Although the primary purpose of this demo is to merely demonstrate the line, we're also going to look at binding properties as well, because we're going to use the line in an interesting way. We're going to have the line extend diagonally from corner to corner, so that it forms an X. So it'll actually be 2 separate lines that intersect in the middle. But we're going to set this up in such a way that when we change the size of the window, the 2 lines will both change appropriately so that the X they form always fills the window and passes through the center of it. So that means we're going to have to somehow bind the coordinates of the line, namely the end and starting point, to the size of the window. And that's where this will get interesting. So at the top of the code, you see the usual imports that we need. You see that we extend application and that we override the start method, all the usual things that you're used to seeing. And then down at the bottom of the first section, we have also the usual things where we're going to give a title to the stage, put the scene in the stage, and show the stage. So we won't worry about all those things, and all that's left in the end then is just a single line of code right here. So this is all we need to talk about initially, but it's going to use something called a line pane, which is defined at the bottom of the screen here, and we do need to look at that in detail. So this line pane is this pane that's going to have this X in it that will follow the size of the window around appropriately. From our perspective here, we simply know that this is called a line pane, and we're going to simply drop it into the scene in the following way. So we create a new scene, and we say scene equals new scene, and then the child that we put in the pane is going to be the returned result of our line pane class that we need to look at. And we're going to make the initial size of our window 200 by 200. So what exactly happens then in the line pane class? Well, this is where all the interesting stuff happens, right here in this class definition. So let's take a close look at it. First of all, it extends the normal plain Jane ordinary pane that we learned about earlier. Our line pane has a single constructor called line pane, of course, that takes no arguments. It's a no-arg constructor. And in fact, that's all we have, because all that happens is we construct a line pane, and that's the end of it. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, we're going to define a line. That's what this demo is really about, is lines. So we define our first line, line 1, and we give it an initial start and end coordinates of 10, 10 for the starting point and 10, 10 for the ending point. So initially it's actually just a point that goes from coordinates 10, 10 to 10, 10. Now, we don't change the starting point of 10, 10, we leave it there, but the ending point we immediately revise by changing the end x property of line 1, and in this process of changing it we actually bind it, and you remember what that does, to the width property of our scene minus 10. So think about what this does then. It's starting at location 1010 and it's going to end now at location width of the window minus 10 in both cases, because you can see we've done the same thing on the next line with the y property as well. So again, the initial starting location of our line is going to be 1010, but the ending location will be 10 short of whatever the width and height of the window is. And that's how the endpoint is going to follow the window around as we resize it. We then set the stroke width of our line to 5, which is 5 pixels, so it's a relatively thick line that you're going to see when we show the demo. We set the stroke color to green, so it'll be a green line. And then finally we add it as a child to our pane. Line 2 is a similar story. We started off at the same point, 1010 to 1010. So in other words, it's just a single point initially, but we immediately changed the start x property and the end y property. So think carefully about what this is going to do now. Well, it means that the starting point will always have an x coordinate of 10, but the y coordinate is going to be dependent on the window size, and it will always be 10 short of the end of the window. Now, on the other hand, the x property, the starting point, will change with the window. So this line's coming sort of from the other side of the window, from the right hand side of the window, and it's always going to be 10 shy, because we do a subtract 10 here, of the width of the window. So I think you can see how all this code together is going to make that x get bigger or smaller according to the window size. Again, the other piece of our x is going to be still width 5 and color green. So we have this big X sitting in our window, and it's just going to always resize itself to follow the size of the window. Let's go ahead and try this demo out and see how it looks. So there we go, as promised. Initially we have this line starting at 1010 and finishing 10 short of the width and height of the window. That's our line 1 that we defined in the code. Line 2 is always going to start with an x coordinate 10, but its y coordinate will depend on the window size and will always be 10 short of the height of the window. The other side, it will always be 10 down from the top of the window. That won't change, but it's going to get bigger or smaller with the window, so that the x coordinate here is always 10 short of the width of the window. So if I resize this window, you're going to see that x stretch out accordingly to always exactly fill that window. And the middle of the x, where the two lines cross, is always right in the middle of the window, no matter how I resize this window. So that's a rather interesting, cool demonstration of what would otherwise be a relatively simple thing, a simple line